Welcome to Shauns Take, brought to you by the Keystone Sports Network. Here are your hosts, Shaun and Jim.
Hello and welcome to Shauns Take, brought to you by the Keystone Sports Network. I'm Jim Galante. He is Shaun Gold. Geez, I'm stumbling over names. Shaun Gold, how you doing today?
Doing good, Jim. It's been a exciting past couple weeks in sports for sure. March Madness, MLB, we got NFL news, NBA. Everything's kind of rolling right now. Even in the NFL offseason, it's still busy. So can't complain with all the sports we've been able to view recently.
It is a good time for sports. Two of my favorite things going on. Opening day of baseball. I love baseball. We got that started. We already have some controversy there, which we'll talk about later. And March Madness, perhaps the greatest sporting event on the planet Earth, Shaun. You got to play your pool. You got to get your bracket going. You got to make your picks. Absolutely a lot of fun. And what's interesting this year with the brackets, if you went with number one, Shaun, you did pretty well. We've got a Final Four with every number one seed.
It is. It's the second time in tournament history this has happened. And, the big talk is when there hasn't been a Cinderella team. Arkansas, a 10 seed, would kind of be considered that. But you're coached by John Calipari, who's won national championships before. So you can't really say that they're that true Cinderella story that we've seen other years. And I know the big talk gets down to not just the Final Four, but even if we take a step back, the Elite Eight, 4 1 seeds, 3 2 seeds, and a 3 seed. This was not the tournament of upsets that many of us look forward to every year when March Madness comes. We haven't really gotten the madness. And you can almost argue we've gotten more madness because there hasn't been madness compared to other years. So this has been a crazy year. And I know now the big talk, Jim, has NIL changed the complete landscape? And we touched on this the other week a little bit ago, and it's kind of important to revisit it right now. And I would say it has. It's allowed teams to be more active in the transfer portal. But I don't know about you. I don't think next year we're going to be sitting here in the same week saying we have 4 number one seeds in the Final Four. And the one thing I'll leave with that is that these number one seeds this year have clearly been the best teams in college basketball. From start to finish, these 4 teams were circled on schedules as the toughest opponents you're going to play every single year. And I think it's just a year where 4 1 seeds are truly the best 4 teams in the country. And I don't think we're going to be able to say that next year, the year after, and the year after that.
I agree with you. I don't think you could call this a trend for happening one year. These 4 teams really did separate themselves. They're very good. I haven't seen any evidence that these 4 teams have used NIL and the transfer portal to stock their team with talent. There's a lot of freshmen here, which is typical. The best teams in college basketball. But I will give this one word of warning, and that's I think Duke is a little sneak peek on my picks, but I think Duke is the best team in the country. They've got the most talent. And in a normal year, many of those players would go on to the NBA, and Duke would have to rebuild or reload, which is what they typically do. But watch out, Shaun. Is there any chance that those young freshmen, I'm thinking Cooper Flag, because of NIL, it's not translating transfer portal players coming in, but in Duke, say, maintaining the talent. Now, we've seen that in NCAA football. We saw Ohio State retain all that talent going into this past season, and it paid off. Boy, what if Duke is able to retain the talent that they have on this year's team? Next year will be the test of whether NIL is making a difference or not, Shaun.
I like that point. I completely agree with it. And I would say I think Cooper Flag is a lock to leave, but you never know. When you get a paycheck that could end up being bigger than your NBA paycheck, it's pretty hard to say no to that, even if the NBA has been your dream. He knows he's getting to the NBA at some point. So if some Duke donors can come and pay him more than that rookie salary, which, yes, is a ton of money, and I don't know they'll be able to do that, why would he not stay? So it's going to be interesting. And sticking with Duke, Jim, we've got Duke and Houston coming up. This is a matchup that I'm super, all the matchups are super exciting, but this one's very interesting. Houston's defense here, one of the best in the country. They play slow. We know Duke can score a lot of points. So Duke opened this up at 4.5-point favorite. It's time for some picks, Jim. Who are you going with, Duke or Houston with the spread?
I gave away my pick in that I think Duke is going to win it all. So I think they are easily the most talented team. If you want to have some fun, take a look at some of the NBA draft projections. It is just loaded with Duke players. I actually saw one draft forecast. It was the 2 rounds of the NBA draft. Duke had 6 players listed in the draft. Okay. Nobody else among the Final Four, I think, had more than 2. I believe Florida had 2. Auburn had 1. Houston didn't have any. I think that tells you something about the amount of talent on this Duke team. However, if you're going to build a team that could compete with Duke, could compete with a more talented team, how about Houston? As you pointed out, they play defense. I like numbers, Shaun. How's this for a number for you? Outside of overtime games, okay? Forgetting overtime games, any regulation game, Houston has not allowed over 70 points all year. Can you believe that? So that tells you about the pace they want to play. It tells you the kind of defense that they can play. Defense travels, but give me the more talented team. Even giving up 4.5 points, Shaun, I'm taking the Dukies.
I have to agree with that one there, Jim. I'm scared to play Houston, but Duke is just a better team here. They're the UConn of last year where, hey, there's some other really good teams that can maybe hang with them for a bit, but when push comes to shove and this gets into the last 10 minutes of a game, I just think Duke's going to wear Houston out, and I don't think Houston's going to be able to score enough to keep up with them. I don't think Duke's going to go out and get 80, 90 points like we've seen them do in some other games, but I think they might get to that 70 mark that you just said. Houston has done such a good job keeping teams below, but this isn't every other team that Houston's played, so I'm with you. I'm rocking with Duke here.
I think that is the pick. And Duke, I believe a lot of people know the name Cooper Flagg and think that's the guy. And he is the guy on that Duke team. But there are a lot of other guys on this team, okay? Continental has become my new favorite player, and that was when they had to play the ACC tournament without Cooper Flagg because of the injury. And he just he became the guy. There's multiple players there. There's so much talent on Duke. I think Duke is the pick there. The other side of the bracket, again, 2 number 1 seeds with Auburn and Florida. You had Auburn was number 1 for a good part of the season. They came out of that very tough Southeast Conference, as did Florida. So I like Florida as a 2.5-point favorite in this one. Wanted to get your take on that game.
This is a game I'm so incredibly torn by. I have Florida, Duke in my bracket, going all the way. I thought they've been the best 2 teams all year long. Right now, though, Jim, I have to say I'm switching my pick over to Auburn. Wow. Auburn, to me, has been battle-tested in this tournament. I really like that they got Michigan and then Michigan State. The Big Ten was a force to start March Madness here. And they went through 2 of the biggest pillars in the Big Ten to get here. And it's just, I think when push comes to shove, this might be the madness that we've been waiting for here. Florida should win this game, but it is only 2.5-point spread. It's going to be close. I just think Auburn has some magic in them right now, and I'm reluctantly going to take Auburn here to cover the spread. And with that, only 2.5, I think they might get this upset win, Jim.
It's interesting when you could call it an upset, obviously, because Florida is favored. It's 2.5 points. But when it's only 2.5 points on a neutral court, boy, I'm hesitant to call it too much of an upset. It's a very good matchup. Both these games really are, Shaun. I like the talent on Florida. Auburn has their stars, Johnny Broome, who's Some people think he's the player of the year in college basketball. It's funny how in some of these tournaments, somebody provides that star power. An individual just takes it on their shoulders to carry a team. I could see that happening with Auburn, but I still like Florida's talent. I like that group. I've been picking a Florida-Duke final in my bracket also. I've got Duke winning it all. If you have Duke, Florida in your bracket also, who do you have ultimately winning it all, Shaun?
Ultimately winning it all, I've got Duke, and that prediction has not changed at all this tournament. I was very reluctant to switch over to Auburn in this game right now, especially because my bracket, not that my bracket's perfect and is relying on Florida to get this win, but I was reluctant to switch it. But Duke, I think, hands down, this is their year. Throughout much of my life, there's been a lot of promise from Duke on these runs, and they've fallen short. I think this is the year where Duke really puts it together. They're destined for a national championship, and I think they get it here, Jim. Now, we mentioned in the beginning of this episode, we got MLB too, so it would be a shame to not talk about some baseball on this episode. And the biggest storyline, I think, going on right now in the MLB isn't a Dodgers super team, isn't how the Yankees are doing after losing the World Series. Well, the Yankees are involved in this. It's the torpedo bat. A new bat has been introduced in the MLB. I've got some takes on it, but first, Jim, I want to get your take on what this torpedo bat is and what your thoughts are for it.
Well, just to understand what the torpedo bat is, what they actually did, a typical bat, narrow at the handle and expands out. It's largest at the end of the bat, okay? Now, people have played with bats through the years in different ways. You'll see it's called an old-fashioned bat without the knob on it, although there's some contemporary players who have done the same thing. I don't know if you remember this. There was a point where at the end of the bat, they hollowed it out a little bit to get rid of some weight for make the bat lighter, a little bat, a quickness that they're looking for. What the torpedo bat does is it moves the thickest part of the bat from the very end. It moves it down a little bit, which there are hitters, where that's where most of their hits come from. The ball contacts the bat, not at the end of the bat, but a little bit lower. And what they did was they shifted some of the mass from the end of the bat down a little bit. So where the bat strikes the ball, that's where the most mass is. Pretty easy physics there. I was not a physics major. Mass, acceleration, force. So that's what they're doing. Now, the interesting thing is, over the weekend, opening weekend, the Yankees hit about 10,000 home runs against Milwaukee. Many of them are using these torpedo bats. So instantly, everyone started saying, there you go, this torpedo bat. It's the greatest thing. It reminds me of when I was a kid, and we always played wiffle ball with those skinny yellow bats. Someone one day brought a big fat red bat, and it's like we outlawed it where we played wiffle ball, Shaun. The thing to remember, though, is these are not completely new. There were actually a lot of players, a lot of teams had used this bat even going back to last season. Now, it's still going to be popular. There's still going to be more players, I think, trying this out. But I also think, Shaun, this outburst of home runs and runs by the Yankees, I think it might have a little more to do with Milwaukee pitching than with the Yankee bat. Just to add on to that, Milwaukee, after they got out of Yankee Stadium, they played the Kansas City Royals and gave up double-digit runs to the Royals also.
I completely agree. I think the Yankees went crazy. They're a very powerful team. And all of a sudden, what we can see is that they have this new bat. And like you said, not even a completely new bat. It's something that has been around. And I was watching an interview on this from the guy who designed the bat. And he said it's more about the player than it is the bat itself. It's not like this bat all of a sudden can allow myself to walk out on a major league field and start hitting dingers left and right. You still have to be an elite hitter, and you have to now hit that sweet spot on the bat. So as you mentioned, some people are going to naturally have a sweet spot that's a little higher on the bat, a little lower on the bat, are right in that torpedo spot. So if you don't have that sweet spot in your swing, the torpedo bat is not going to help you. It's going to hurt you more than it helps you. So we're going to see a lot of players test it out, and we're going to see some players have probably pretty good success because all of a sudden their sweet spot now is right in that torpedo zone on the bat, and that's going to lead to more pop from them. But you can also see somebody, and I don't know his swing well enough, but maybe Shohei Ohtani could go use it, and if that's not where his sweet spot is, he's not belting 50 home runs off of that. So some players, it's going to lead to positive regression. Some it's going to lead to negative regression, if just depending on the pathway that their swing takes. And one thing that I want to point out about it that was pretty funny is DraftKings now has a betting section for player home runs who use the torpedo bat. So they have taken advantage of the media hype that has been generated off of this torpedo bat, and they're having some fun with it. And the betting market is clearly responding to it. And I think it really helped the case that Elly De La Cruz used it for the first time and hit 2 home runs with it. Now, is that going to happen every game? Absolutely not. But I think the MLB is loving it right now, that it's created all this hype and buzz. And, in a week or two or maybe a month, I would bet things are going to calm down with the torpedo bat. But for the time being, it's fun, and it's a good storyline that the MLB is taking advantage of right now.
It is a lot of fun. And one last note on it, Shaun, I think a lot of the technology that has come into baseball has favored the pitchers. Okay. Remember, the pitchers act, the batters have to react. So some of the statistical analysis about pitch selection, but also the spin rate on the pitches, the movement on the pitches. There's so much more of this science and advancement that has helped the pitching. It's about time there's something out there to help the batters. The MLB has come out and said the bat is legal. I don't see them changing that unless it gets absolutely crazy. But if it does lead to more offense, I think MLB is actually going to be happy about it. All right, Shaun, how about we shift sports? You mentioned early on there's still NFL news, and we were waiting for our show to record to hear the end results. The NFL meetings, they were going to discuss the Tush Push, made famous by the Eagles, or the brotherly shove, as they often like to call it in Philadelphia. And I'm not sure how much momentum there was to outlaw it, but they decided, Shaun, to table the vote on it. Your thoughts on the Tush Push?
I'll keep it short and simple on this one. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. It's like the torpedo bat. It works for some teams. It might not work for others. If you're really good at it, you have a really good offensive line, a strong quarterback, and somebody who can shove them forward, you're going to be good at it. If you don't have that, it's not for you. So just because the Eagles have mastered it doesn't mean that we now need to go and ban it. It's a completely legal formation. They're not breaking any rules. I don't think the NFL now needs to go in and introduce new rules because somebody did it. Should we ban Patrick Mahomes from throwing the ball because he's throwing it better than most quarterbacks? No. So the Eagles found something that works with their roster. We've seen the Buffalo Bills. They've replicated it and had success with it. And then we've also seen teams, I think the Giants tried to do it last year, and it didn't look too much like how Philly does it. So that doesn't mean that because they can't do it with their personnel, you go and ban it. So, I'm happy the NFL tabled this. I hope next year it's not even a discussion. Figure it out. Figure out how to stop it. And quit complaining. Do we need to ban Saquon Barkley from getting 20 carries because he's too good and defenses can't stop him? Absolutely not. So it's a legal play. There's nothing wrong with it. End of discussion right there for me.
I'm in agreement with you, and not just because I'm an Eagles fan. I think also you have the Eagles and the Bills doing it. I believe I read somewhere those two teams combined did it more often than the entire rest of the NFL. So if it was such a perfect play, everyone would be doing it, and they're not, okay? Both the Bills and the Eagles have big, strong quarterbacks that are part of it. The Eagles, I know, have this great offensive line. That's all part of it. So that's why they are more talented at those positions. That's why it works for those two teams. With that said, towards the end of the year, there were some teams who were really stacking the line of scrimmage. They were forcing the Eagles to do something a little different. So there were a couple times when the Eagles lined up and actually did something a little bit different. Didn't have Jalen Hurts go straight ahead. He might go left or right, do something a little bit different. That's because teams have started to react to it. Guess what? That's part of football. You adapt to what the other teams are doing successfully, Shaun.
Keystone Sports Network.